Hello, everyone. Anthony here for another edition of the Gruemonkey podcast. And this time, we have Marc Meyers on the show, writer and director of the new film, My Friend Dahmer. It's out now on Amazon Instant Video. You can rent it for $5 or you could buy it. And it's also on iTunes. So that means you can go ahead and grab your little Apple TV, your Fire Stick, your Roku, look on the app, and the film will be there. You can just start watching it instantly, streaming from these services, because this film was a limited theatrical run, but now it is on these streaming services. So go check it out. You have no excuse. Me and Mark on this episode, we talked about the behind the scenes of the film, going into casting and creating the story from the book and translating it to film, and how his vision came true from that. Working with high school kids and filming a lot of stuff around high school, we discussed kind of that process of creating these characters and making them so realistic and what he did to fulfill that in the film. Thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time to do this. This is a lot of fun. We'll hope to have you on soon if you have any other upcoming projects that you have along the way. But this is our discussion about the film My Friend Dahmer. Here he is, Marc Meyers. Let's do it.
It has been difficult with your mother, so I moved into a motel.
Take a deep breath. Are you okay?
Hey, Dahmer, it's in the bag.
You seem healthy to me.
What about what's on a patient's mind?
We need to talk about Jeff.
What is this? You wouldn't know about the kids because you're not at home anymore.
You want to talk to somebody about it?
I see things in you that I don't like about myself. I want you to have friends in ways that I never could.
I thought you stopped.
Dad always told me what to do, just like you, just like you.
I like bones. It interests me. What's inside?
God, Dahmer, you are such a freak.
He's not a sideshow attraction.
We're just having fun, you know?
Get out of your shell. You need to be more normal.
I'm just like anybody else.
But the film process from John's book, what was his decision to come to you for the project, or how was that process starting the project?
Well, my producing partner and I were doing a little research and looking at naturalistic graphic novels that may be interesting source material for another independent film. And completely separately, we had thought that Portrait of a Serial Killer as a young boy would be an interesting concept for a film. So when we discovered this book, it was given to us by a publisher, and it was an advance copy before it was actually on bookshelves, we immediately just sort of like were excited to make that discovery. And I read it that night, emailed Durf, and was not really aware of how many other people had been tracking or waiting for the book to come out for the same reason, that they thought it would be a good film. But in the way that I enthusiastically had described how I'd love to do it and turn it into a movie, it was all just sort of meant to be, and he entrusted us with the property. So that was at the beginning of 2012, and by the end of 2014, my screenplay was on the blacklist. So, which then gave it a lot more exposure, and I was meeting with a lot of actors and stuff, and we were starting packaging the film. But it really was a very genuine, good fortune that we had discovered this book early on and had the right, sensibility that he entrusted us with the property.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's like they, kind of piecing it together over periods of time, and then to finally where you're able to kind of express that. What do you think, like, personally to you? I think for me, I can say that, I'm definitely fascinated with, the macabre and a lot of the serial killers, their mindsets. What do you think fascinated you about it to where you wanted to kind of explore it in your own vision? Because when you're taking that concept from, the book and a lot of the research that you individually done on your own time, What do you think was kind of the thing that fascinated you about Dahmer himself that maybe you wanted to really portray this to the fullest?
Well, going in, I thought sort of the idea of a young boy before he became a monster was an interesting concept. Then the book provides so much personal information about his firsthand account of what Jeff was like as his friend and what we've come to understand him as a teenager, that I knew that creating a character like him, which is based on a real person, which makes it even that much more fascinating to audience members, about a man whose psyche is on the edges, or watching someone lose their sanity and on the verge of becoming a monster, are all really fascinating places to tell a story, and a great kind of role for a young actor. So there was so much there to delve into, that it was just a creatively abundant place to make a story.
That was the whole movie. It's just kind of like him on the, losing sanity. And well, the one thing that I really liked how you portrayed, like the high school kids, because I think in a lot of films, it's always hard to make, like, sometimes you look at films that, whether it could be any really kind of film and, it takes place in high school. And sometimes you look at how some kids are portrayed and it doesn't seem very realistic. But I feel like what you captured with kind of like him being the loner and being the outcast, and then by the time, he's trying to fit in, fake seizuring on the ground and all that stuff, you can really like see the cliques and like the bullies and the kind of like, that's how kids would treat people. So, and that's how kids are still treated, in high school, with bullies and everything like that. So I think the way you kind of made it within this universe, it really threw you in Dahmer's head. Every person that goes to high school, they have to deal with that, whether they're being the outcast. So you made it where it really, like, you really felt bad for Dahmer, because there's a lot of scenes in there where you could just really feel for him struggling to fit in. I thought that was done brilliantly.
Thank you very much. Like, what I find fascinating about the story that is in the book also is how familiar are the sort of high school environment that he lived in. He wasn't someone who became a monster, but like grew up in a cave or from a really cruel environment everywhere. So the things that he was experiencing are very familiar to most, if not every, high school kid that comes to America. And there's always a day where you, as no matter who you are as a high school kid, find yourself sitting alone in the cafeteria. Maybe not for your entire high school experience, but everyone can relate to all the different roles and cliques that coexist in that high school, and him being welcomed into one group of band nerds. Yeah. And we, just like everyone hopes to sort of find their friends or find people that appreciate him. And so it was just recognizable, and that's what makes it partially haunting to everyone else. Like how you can relate to him and know who he also is going to become makes it that much more disturbing.
Ross Lynch, I think that, what made you stumble upon him? Because I mean, he nailed it as the performer. I mean, he looked just like him. I mean, you pull up pictures of him in high school and compare it to him, it looks identical. What was the choice for that? Because that was like that was really a fitting part for Ross.
Well, I didn't stumble upon him. It was an exhaustive search that involved talking to.
So it took a little bit.
It took, I might over the course of a year had these waves of time where I was being introduced to actors between the ages of 17 and let's say 25. And I would meet with them either at a cafe in New York, or often meetings with actors are set up to meet in like hotel lobbies. And the same would go when I was in California. Or I was Skyping with actors that had read the script also that might be living somewhere else in the country because they're maybe working on a set or they're based somewhere else in the country. And through that, I must have met over 100 actors that were maybe not all of them contenders for that role, but I wanted to meet with them because they could have ended up being part of the Dahmer fan club, some of the other friends. And in that process, I had been introduced to Ross Lynch and sat down with him and it was even before he read the script, so I still told him about the project. And then when we went through the formal auditions in New York and LA, he was busy with his sibling band called R5, and he couldn't make the auditions in Los Angeles, so he sent in a tape that he had done off the same sides that I was auditioning with. By that time, I was really rooting for him because I thought he was an interesting choice. I knew him to be, from watching his Disney shows and his Teen Beach movies, that he was a very talented leading man. And though the content of that is much more bubblegum, I could see that behind all that was a really talented guy. And now he's both a trained dancer, a singer, and an actor. So I knew that he could get the gait, the sort of speech patterns, and everything else to sort of inhabit the character. And then he finally came through New York in an available weekend, and we got to hang out for about 2 hours or even more in a rehearsal space and mess around with the material. And I asked him to do some other improv exercises as Jeff Dahmer. And though I already sort of felt like he was the guy, it was proof to everyone else also that was involved with the project at that early stage that this was a really interesting choice for the Dahmer role. So, you know, I knew, because everyone can recognize the real Jeff Dahmer, he's not someone you can fictionalize, that I had to find someone that had some likeness to it. Now, I wasn't at that point like cross-comparing the faces, but, you know, I knew he could look similar. And when you put him in hair and makeup and put on the wardrobe and the glasses, it just got frighteningly close to the real guy.
Yeah, and especially when you're stepping into the mindset of Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, you know, with him like quit like gutting the fish, you know, like stabbing it immediately after his friends are like, oh no, throw it back, you know, and he just stabs it and he's like, oh, I wanted to see what the insides look like. They're just like, oh, like that was just a great little like, holy crap, this is getting out of control. I just kind of like how it's pieced together with, you know, him hanging out with his friends. He did a great job with that. Even Alex Wolff, I believe, played John himself. Yeah. He was just a great way of playing kind of like, you know, he's really just a creative person, obviously a cartoonist now, but it's kind of cool that, like, you know, you see how they also feel bad. It's like the bullies, you know, not so much the bullies, but they're kind of being, you know, making him do all these little antics to get a good laugh. You can see how they end up feeling guilty. And again, just like props to all the actors that made it like these kids so authentic. You know, it didn't seem like it was forced in any way. I really enjoyed that kind of idea of following them on this journey. And then also with his home life, with Dahmer's home life. And then I love the who played the parents. I'm blanking on their names right now, but they did a great job at like
Anne Heche and Dallas Roberts.
Roberts, okay.
Right, yeah, and I always wanted Dallas to do the role of Lionel, and just held to that through the whole journey of casting the film. And so I'm glad that we could make it work with him, and his schedule aligned, and it was all meant to be. And I met Anne pretty early on in sharing the script with, you know, sort of agents that were representing adult actors, and she immediately gravitated to the role. And then when we met, we totally hit it off. And we all had a really, really, really good time working together. I will say about like working with the high school kids, and just a story about high school kids, as you referenced the believability of it. I feel like we all remember in high school how you had a friend, and then they kind of drifted away, and then you found them again later in your high school experience. You don't really remember why you stopped hanging out, or you might have made a friend halfway through high school, even though you've known them all since middle school, if not even earlier from elementary school. There's some thing that draws you to each other, and then either you remain friends or drift apart. And I felt like that's kind of what happens here, where kids don't necessarily understand why they become friends with someone else, but also don't really understand how might they be cruel to someone and push them away, and how kids, as well as the teachers, the adults, the parents, all were missing the signs that from this kid that was troubled and highly disturbed, but had no one to talk to about it, or had an inability to even process it himself. And, just all those things sort of felt familiar to me and reminded me of just being a teenager.
Yeah, because that's That's the great thing about the film. And I also wanted to say with being a director and, getting all of the shots, I'm just curious on, because I really like the 70s aesthetic to the film. I always enjoy when filmmakers have to make everything, fit that time period. How hard is that as a filmmaker? Because I'm an aspiring director. I'm trying to, make my own films and stuff. And I was always thinking about if I ever did a film in another time period, how hard that would actually be to get like the cars and the clothes. Like, is that like a challenging thing, or do you find joy in kind of like getting all of these people to get like wardrobes and, get the hairstyle? That seems like a pretty fun process, but it seems also pretty grueling to get everything down pat.
Well, it's a major operation. I mean, on all levels. At the same time, it's completely exhilarating. Don't forget, it's not like I found the cars. There was a transportation coordinator that was hunting down for the cars throughout the state of Ohio and the surrounding areas that could be driven in and not
So there's a team of people.
There's a team of people. So, as what you start as a director is with a bunch of my own research that helped inform me writing the screenplay and a visual sort of bucket of inspiration. And then from there, that stuff I collected and could share with the various departments. And that would complement having already interviewed and decide on who to align with, what they already felt this movie to be. Now, one thing that I knew across the board was a goal, which is like, we are not doing the 1970s disco version of that era. So there's a very Midwestern, late 70s kind of thing that the wardrobe and the production design department understood. And I had this deep collection of photographs that I had found, most of them, off the internet, but most of them came from the U.S. National Archives photo collections that are seen on Flickr. And there's some photographers that had photographed high schools in the 70s in the Midwest. And those images I created mood boards with. I created like a lookbook. I had various visual guides that I could share with other people. And from there, it was proof that we weren't trying to create something that was in any way a cartoon version of the 70s, like that 70s show, for example, right? So it's like we're going for this. The biggest daunting thing, I think, was the fact we had to hit the ground running in week one of filming at a high school where we had extras at close to over 200 what they call man days, which are the days with which these extras, if they're 25 to 30 a day because of a classroom scenes, or fill the hallways with a bunch of kids. There was a lot of kids every day that were extras that had to be put in hair and makeup to look the part. The ones that actually look the best might be in the foreground, but also that's just that was an amazing, daunting task in the first week. And the cars we found from around the state. And then you have, when you're working with, these departments, they have all your car options as photographs up on a wall, and you're figuring out which cars best suit which characters. But fortunately, Akron, Ohio, where we filmed, because we filmed in and around Jeffrey Dahmer's actual childhood home and town.
That's I was going to ask how that was.
There's a big
there.
car culture there too. So there were some car collectors that were more than willing to offer up their vehicles in for parking lot scenes and things like that. So fortunately, cool. Ohio hasn't changed that much since the late 70s, and the woods still look the same, and a lot of the houses still look the same. So, I remember once in a while you're like pointing the camera somewhere, and you might see something that looks clearly from a modern era, like a DirecTV dish, on a roof, and you had to find a way to either move the camera so it's not in the frame or somehow cover that. So there's always those obstacles, but it's also quite fun to be surrounded by stuff from another era that way.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're really stepping into this universe. And like I that's what I was going to say with, filming in Ohio and filming, in the house and everything like that. I mean, that must have been just incredible, because that really just fits that's when I was watching, I was like, this definitely looks like Ohio, and the way, the aesthetic of it. I just like how, I also really appreciate the darkness and the colors as well. I don't know if that was intentionally through your vision. And I was watching it on a Sony 900E TV, and just the upscaling. I mean, it looked great with just the really vibrant colors of like the cars or the clothes. I don't know what it was, but it was like the contrast between that and the scenes. It really brought like a nice, cool aesthetic to the overall film, from like, even the shots in the woods, and him, when he starts picking up roadkill, and him walking with, the road in the background. And I also really enjoyed the long shots of him walking, and just kind of like it, panning as he's walking down the hallway, and you can just kind of see his miserable, he just looks miserable at some scenes. And I think that aesthetic, even getting all that stuff, definitely paid off, because I feel like it came out really well. And especially with, I feel like there's certain things with certain serial killer movies, or movies that are about these killers, that are Netflix series and stuff, kind of explaining or documenting these events and whatnot. But as opposed to following, the film, when you're going off of a novel, was it hard to either stay true to it, but also bring something of your own to it? Was it kind of like you had to give a balance of maybe what the novel, but then of course you have to have your own vision to it? So when you were kind of writing and putting together the screenplay, what was your main goal for the end goal? Was it like, I really want to capture the true aspects of the book, but I also want to bring certain elements to it with some kind of scenes that I would have pictured it?
It works on many levels. I do think at the end of the process, I was able to look back and think the shortest way of saying it is we were able to communicate the spirit of the book while also being very loyal to the facts that he was able to share. So part of it was just that you're carrying the spirit and the truth of Durf's perspective as a graphic novelist into the story that we were telling. It's about a kid who will one day become a serial killer. So the cinematographer he was never filming a serial killer. He was filming a bunch of high school kids. The performance is something that I was privately working with Ross on, so that I could remind him, and he really could go to these places where we could see what might be on his mind, but he's still just, hanging out with other high school kids doing stupid high school things together. So there's this duality that's taking place upon his inner psychology and the world that he's around. And one of the things going in was, I wanted to, recreate the spirit of being a teenager, that was like a time capsule from 1977 and 78. And at the same time, that behavior, I think, stays true to how teenagers act 10 years later when I was in high school, or even till today. It's just like teenagers will be teenagers. We just don't necessarily know what really was in the dark, recesses of this future monster, and that's what's going on. So in the process of, adapting the book, you have to look at how is the medium different. Movies don't necessarily chronicle the whole duration of high school the same way that a book can. So we had to find a way of taking the story points of that book and finding a way to dramatize them into what really takes place over the course of a little bit longer than one school year, and just use the form of film and knowing that it's different. So how do I use the facts of that book to fit into a movie, and how he is a lonely kid who finds friends and tries to keep them, but then can't hold on to them as he's slipping away, and holding on to his sanity and losing his sanity deeper and deeper into the story. And then the one thing that was a big switch from the book is that the book, because the author is not, he's a journalist by trade, and he was talking about from his perspective what he knew of Jeff. He basically knew, and or public records through FBI testimony that was gathered from the arrested Jeffrey Dahmer later in life. His parents' marriage was divorcing, so he didn't really write what was going on in those walls. He just basically suggested that there his parents' marriage is falling apart. But that gave me the room.
They're fighting a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and that he knew that at some point he knew in high school maybe that Jeff's father had moved out. You know, that those kind of basic top line things were maybe known amongst the friends. But what we were able to do is then realize the movie could balance what I think was necessary, that this is a conversation about also nurture versus nature. And so it gave me a lot of room to dramatize and explore what might be going on in the halls of his family. And so having visited the Dahmer house, when I did a rewrite, I could very better understand what it was like for him to like grow up in that house. And the fact that he may be hungover or smelling like booze, sharing a bedroom with his younger brother is incredible and crazy, but that parents may not realize that he's, you know, coming home from school drunk because they're busy themselves disputing or just doing their own thing. And that the father is missing the signs and the mother is missing the signs and the marriage is falling apart. Like all these things were at play simultaneous to him trying to just go to school every day to get away from that shit.
Like when the father sat down with him, it was like, look, you gotta, you know, join more clubs, you gotta do this, you have to, you know, get out there. I think that's when he was just like, you know, especially when he throws out all the stuff in his little laboratory. That was another great scene. But I think like they have, you know, that was his thing, to be like, all right, well, I'm going to try to just do things myself and then, you know, find my place within this group. And I also like the intense scenes where, like you mentioned, how it's not really portraying him as a serial killer as a high school kid, where you think so many times that he's about to do something, you know, especially with the jogger. I mean, those are intense scenes. Like, you know, first he's just watching him, you know, just simply watching, you know, kind of creepy. And then all of a sudden he has a bet. The one time he's watching, you're like, wow, that's you know, and it gets intense because you're just waiting for him to go out and hit him, you know, or trip him up, but he never does. And that was a really intense scene. What do you think was your favorite scene to film or maybe shoot? I mean, I'm sure the high school scenes were a lot of fun because, again, you're kind of capturing that essence of the youth. But did you have it in particular scene that you're most proud of, or maybe the most fun you had filming?
I mean, the whole thing for me was an adventure. It's hard to isolate something. You try to make every day feel big and bold and put the camera in a fun place and do something interesting and creative that day. I do know that, like, I think mentally the most challenging day for me to make the scene work was the prom. And that had to do with just, I had to shoot it in a small reception hall. And you had to have extras that didn't know how to dance like they were from the 70s, to be taught how to dance like they were in the 70s, to film every part of that entire prom scene from one perspective, like one side of the room, and then flip all of the equipment onto the other side of the room and move the camera around and then redo everything from the other perspective. That was the hardest thing, was just keeping all the little pieces of that scene in my head, even if it was on paper, to make them all work, just because there were so many moving pieces with the dolly track and the extras and Ross and the music. There was just so much. It wasn't like just being out in the woods with a couple characters doing a creepy scene. So it was just that there was so much in front of me at that one given time in such a tight space. That was probably the most draining mentally, but at the same time, it was like a lot of fun. We like made the prom. We were at the prom. So, I mean, every scene kind of was fun. I'm really glad that we were able to have a steady cam on set and the dolly track, and that I could keep the camera moving the way I, you know, imagined, so that there wasn't a sort of a staticness to watching these characters, so that you could follow them down a hall or into the house and kind of give the visual experience that kind of fluid energy. You know, that was kind of my thing.
How's that feeling when, you know, a film of yours went to the Tribeca Film Festival first?
Right.
If it went to that first, how is that feeling when it's done and it's no longer your baby, so to speak, your little project, and you release it out there? How was that feeling when you finally released it to an audience? you want people to definitely like it, and you want to make sure people appreciate your vision that you had with the film, which process where you're like, okay, let's do this film festival. Let's hope people, like it, hoping that, it goes over well with a lot of the fans of stuff like this, where it's really true to the real life events.
Well, we felt like we had something special. We felt we had something subversive and that people were intrigued by. There was a huge sort of social media chatter that actually started on the movie before we started filming. And I could sort of sense that there was just a lot of interest from the book, from true crime fans, people that were crazy about Jeffrey Dahmer, or knew Ross Lynch and Alex Wolff and the rest of the cast. So they were just tracking it. So we felt like we had something that people were waiting for. There's this weird moment, honestly, right before the premiere, and where I feel like I'm not only going to share the movie for the first time with an unsuspecting audience. It's not a test audience, but I'm also going to somehow say goodbye to the movie because I no longer can hold it close to me and my collaborators. It's just now in the world for
it's out there.
People. It's out there for people's opinions on it and for entertainment. And it's just, that's the purpose. So you kind of partially say goodbye to it, but then I have, the thrilling benefit of being able to travel with the movie to various film festivals and here in Europe and share the film with all kinds of audiences. And so it really has been an amazing experience, even before it was theatrically released in the U.S. in November. And now, as you know, last Tuesday, it started playing on digital, cable VOD and iTunes and Amazon and Google Play. So now it's just for anyone anywhere in the U.S., they can just watch it, and it's starting to play in other countries as well. So, it's what we had hoped for and what we believed was possible for the film, because we thought that the story was singular enough. I can't think of another film that was about a real serial killer from his days in high school. So it'll forever, for at least a while, exist as its own one thing. There's no other movies that look at that place and time. So it's amazingly gratifying, and it's great. And I got to say, I met so many fun, cool, and unusual people through the process of making the movie and then sharing it. So it's been great.
I think streaming now more than ever, I always talk about it on the podcast with a lot of, when we talk to filmmakers and how, to get films out there to the masses, because people like streaming and it's so easy for them to get a hold of stuff like that. And I think that's better for them to really expand, for films to expand on that audience. Because for me, going into it and knowing that we're going to do this interview, I was like, all right, let me watch it. Just pull up Amazon on my TV. And then I, rented it for $5 and it's done, it's already on there. You just watch it. And again, a lot of stuff now and a lot of stuff that's getting behind all of these streaming platforms, it's really great for filmmakers to get their work out there to where it doesn't just stop at, limited theatrical. And like you said, it can reach all of those, real, fans of stuff like this are fascinated by, Jeffrey Dahmer, people that love watching these movies. But like you said, it kind of exists in its own little bubble. I think that's great that it's on those platforms. So anybody that's listening to this, definitely go and, check it out. Is there going to be a Blu-ray of this? Is there going to be any kind of video release? Maybe some. I would love to see a 4K Blu-ray. I'm crossing my fingers because I have a 4K TV, so I'm kind of hoping for some awesome, beautiful looking 4K.
Yeah, no. So Blu-ray is coming out soon. I think it's coming out in March or April, and I've gotten to the point where I've stopped being able to track all the different milestone dates, but it is coming out. It is coming out soon. What will be unique to the Blu-ray and the DVD version is there's going to be behind-the-scenes interviews with Ross, Alex, and all the sort of supporting and lead characters, and including myself. So just talking about the process of making this movie, and so hopefully people just keep buying in all its different ways that you can collect your whole My Friend Dahmer box set, I suppose. And then, there's even the film tie-in version of the book that's come out with images from us working on set. And that also include images of some of my storyboards and how they then became images in the movie. Because one thing that I did do is I used Jerf's original book, and took some of the panels, and when my story and his story continued to overlap, when my script was similar to his book, I used those panels from his book as part of my storyboards. So when I was filming, the sort of spirit of the book was in my storyboards, in these like artist books that I was carrying around with me, and I could make sure that I was, considering how the book suggested those incidences in the story when I was filming. And that was a great way to stay as loyal as one can while still making a movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that that kind of stuff's in the book, and then that's maybe discussed in some of these interviews.
Oh, awesome. I can't wait for that. And thank you so much for taking the time today to talk about it. And, best of luck for the rest of the promotion for the film and all that stuff coming out. Is there anything else that you're working on that you want to plug? If you're on social media where people can catch up and coming projects?
Yeah, there's a couple of projects that I'm very excited about. I mean, I can't announce anything just yet, but some more that are dabbling in the sort of space of genre in the way that My Friend Dahmer kind of suggested elements of thriller and horror. I'm looking at things that also, play to the dark sides of our interest and psyche, but also, like Dahmer, have a sense of humor about it all too. So I can't throw out the titles right now, but a couple things are taking shape as we speak that I'm excited by. And I'm at, Marc Meyers at all the sort of social media things. So that's MARC MEYERS. And so just, at Marc Meyers. And from there, I'd love to stay in touch with anyone that's a fan of My Friend Dahmer, because it's a great place. And everyone working on the movie, we're doing some more weird stuff in the future.
Awesome. Great to hear. Marc Meyers, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with Gruemonkey today. And you have a great one, man. We'll hope to have you on soon if you're promoting something else in the near future.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds great. I'm glad we got to connect this way. I appreciate it.
That is it, everyone. That's our discussion with Marc Meyers. Thank you so much again for taking the time to do that with us. And, of course, you can check out My Friend Dahmer right now on the streaming services, iTunes, with your Apple TV. You got that Fire Stick. Go on Amazon Instant and rent it, buy it. The Blu-ray is going to be coming out in April or May, or I think you said March or April, but there is no actual date yet. So March or April for the Blu-ray. I couldn't find a street date yet, but I think they'll probably be coming out with that stuff shortly because there's a lot of extra features that's tacked on at the end. Just like he said, there's going to be different interviews and probably director's commentary. That'd be really cool to hear some more insight from Marc Meyers himself. But other than that, we have more stuff coming out in the horror realm. The new Hellraiser Judgment just dropped. It actually just came out. It finally came out. We actually did an interview with Paul Taylor himself, Pinhead, the new Pinhead, back in July. And it was a great discussion. Back then, he didn't even know when or if this thing was even going to drop or when it was coming out. So that's probably going to be the next thing I'm going to be working on and coming out with. We have Linnea Quigley in the pipeline. That's another one we did back in July. So it took a little bit to get all this stuff going, but we have a specific format now and uploading these to YouTube and posting them on the website as well. So people that are visiting the website can be referred to the YouTube page. So go ahead and subscribe to the Gruemonkey TV YouTube page where all these interviews will be posted, all the audio stuff. So we have a lot of stuff coming your way. So stay tuned and I'll catch you guys next time. Goodbye.